If you dig the twisted, admire the outlandish, and are enamored by the unusual, you're in the right place. True crime, the supernatural, the unexplained, now you're speaking our language. If you agree, join us as we dive into the darker side. You know, because it's more fun over here. Welcome to Total Conundrum.
Warning, some listeners may find the following content disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Ha 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 ha.
Welcome, you twisted souls, to another spine-tingling episode of Total Conundrum. I'm your host, Jeremy, and as always, I'm joined by the ever-delightful Tracy. How are you doing, Tracy?
Oh, just here to sprinkle a little sarcasm on the darkest corners of humanity. Speaking of which, who are we diving into today, Jeremy?
Today, we are chatting about none other than the poster boy for sinister charm and homicidal lunacy, the infamous Ted Bundy. This guy was like the Ken doll of serial killers, if Ken had a penchant for murder and necrophilia.
Ah, Ted Bundy, the man who proved that sometimes it's not what's on the outside that counts, unless you're talking about hiding bodies in the woods. Then I suppose outside matters a lot.
Absolutely. For those who somehow missed the 70s or weren't born yet, Ted Bundy was America's sweetheart. If America's sweetheart was a manipulative, sadistic psychopath, he was known for his charm and intelligence. This guy could talk his way out of a paper bag and right into your nightmares.
It's fascinating, really. Bundy had this ability to appear perfectly normal, even likable. He'd flash that pearly white, all-American smile, and boom. You'd think he was your next-door neighbor, not a guy who kept a hacksaw in his trunk.
And that's exactly what made him so terrifying. 1 minute, you're helping a guy with a broken arm load books into his car. The next minute, you're featured on the 6 o'clock news. Well, what's left of you anyways?
Ted was the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. He was like a used car salesman, but instead of selling beaters, he was selling trips to the afterlife, and people bought it. Hook, line, and sinker.
Sounds like a shitty vacation to me.
Me too.
We're going to peel back the layers of Bundy's twisted life today. First, we'll take a peek at his early years. Spoiler alert, they were about as messed up as a soup sandwich.
A soup sandwich sounds pretty damn messed up to me.
Me too.
Then we'll delve into his quote-unquote methods. If you can call bludgeoning and strangling a method, it's more like a DIY guide from hell.
Next, we'll follow the investigation that finally caught up with him. It's a roller coaster ride of police blunders, lucky breaks, and Bundy's own overconfidence. He was like Wile E. Coyote with a law degree.
Beep, beep.
Honk, honk.
And of course, we'll cover his capture and trial. This guy turned the courtroom into his own personal theater. If only he put that much effort into law school, he could have been defending people instead of, dismembering them.
Disremembering them?
Yeah, that too.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, we'll talk about Bundy's legacy because, believe it or not, he left an impact. And not just the creepy, I'm never helping anyone with car troubles again kind.
Right? Bundy became a twisted sort of celebrity. He's like the Kardashian of killers, famous for all the wrong reasons.
So buckle up, listeners. It's going to be a bumpy ride through the mind of one of history's most notorious killers. Remember, if you start feeling too freaked out, just know that right now, Bundy is 6 feet under, trying to charm his way out of hell.
That's right, and hopefully failing miserably. Now grab a drink, turn the lights down, or maybe just leave them on for this one. Lock your doors and windows, because tonight we're diving into the chilling, calculating, and sinister world of one of America's most infamous serial killers, Ted Bundy.
Before we dive into this terrifying tale, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Leave us a review on Apple and Spotify, and don't forget to ring that notification bell on YouTube so you're always in the loop with our latest episodes. Your support keeps us going, If you have any story ideas or recommendations, contact us at totalconundrum.com or find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter.
And because we love keeping you both horrified and entertained, we've got some trailers from our podcast pals at Murder and Mimosas Podcast and the Suspended Sentence Podcast. Make sure to show them some love and give them a listen. Without further ado, let's get into the terrifying mind and crimes of Ted Bundy. And remember, folks, never trust a man with a Volkswagen Beetle and a fake cast.
We'll be back after these messages.
Welcome to Murder and Mimosas.
I'm Shannon.
And I'm Danica.
Together as a mother and daughter duo, we host Murder Mimosas, true crime podcast with an episode released every Saturday at 10 a.m. so you can listen to it during prime brunch time. While we don't require a mimosa, we do highly recommend one. All of our episodes are cases that we found really interesting or just really stuck with us because we hope they'll do the same for you. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Back to the show.
As promised, we're diving headfirst into the early life of our main maniac, Ted Bundy. This is where we unraveled the origin story of America's favorite sociopath. Spoiler alert, it's not quite a fairy tale, but it's got more twists than an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Ted was born on November 24, 1946, in the sleepy town of Burlington, Vermont. His birth was anything but sleepy, though. His mother, Eleanor Louise Caldwell, was just 22 years old and unmarried, which in the 1940s was like having a flashing neon sign over your head that said, "Hussy!"
Oh boy.
To avoid the shame and whispers of judgmental neighbors, Ted's grandparents, Samuel and Eleanor Miriam Caldwell, stepped in. They raised Ted as their son, and his mother was introduced to him as his sister. Talk about a twisted family tree.
Twisted indeed. We're off to a strange start already, Jeremy. This is already like a soap opera, but with a lot more dismemberment. So, little Teddy grows up thinking his grandparents are his parents and his mom is his sister. Freud would have a field day with this one. His grandfather, Samuel, was a pretty unpleasant character, known for his violent temper, which might have rubbed off a bit on young Ted. Grandma Eleanor, on the other hand, was reportedly timid and had agoraphobia, which meant she hardly ever left the house. It's no wonder Ted ended up with more issues than the New York Times.
Yeah, talk about a rough upbringing. But despite the family chaos, young Ted seemed to be a pretty normal kid on the outside. Or at least, that's what the neighbors thought. He had this uncanny ability to blend in, a real chameleon, that one. But even then, there were hints of darkness lurking beneath the surface. For instance, Bundy had a weird fascination with knives as a child. Imagine coming home to find little Ted happily playing with a collection of butcher knives. Definitely not what you'd expect from the kid next door.
He's a real sharp one.
Oh yeah, he is.
And that's just the beginning. As Ted grew older, he became more adept at hiding his true nature. In his teenage years, he was described as intelligent, charming, and well-mannered. Kind of like the Eddie Haskell of serial killers. He was active in church and had a close group of friends. On the surface, he seemed like a perfect young man, but underneath, that fascination with violence never really went away.
That's right. Bundy managed to keep his dark side under wraps, excelling academically and socially. He graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in 1965 and went on to attend multiple universities. He even had a steady girlfriend, Stephanie Brooks. During his time at the University of Washington, to the outside world, Ted was the all-American boy, the guy you'd want to take home to meet your parents. Little did they know, behind that charming smile was a mind already crafting his sinister plans.
Bundy's academic achievements are pretty impressive. He majored in psychology at the University of Washington, where he was known as a bright student with a promising future. He also dabbled in law at the University of Puget Sound and briefly at the University of Utah. But despite his academic prowess, there was always those little glimpses of his darker tendencies.
Yeah, like that time he was arrested twice as a teenager for suspicion of burglary and auto theft. And because he was Ted Bundy, the charges didn't stick. It's like he had this superpower to wiggle out of trouble. And then there were his relationships. He could be the perfect boyfriend, but also had the habit of peeping into windows and spying on women. You know, typical romantic gestures.
Dude, not my idea of romantic gestures. Ted, he had this dual personality. He could be incredibly charming and persuasive when he wanted to be, but there was always that other side, the one that would peek through just enough to make you uneasy. Even his girlfriend Stephanie noticed it. After they broke up, he was devastated and became even more determined to prove himself. He wanted to show everyone he could succeed. Unfortunately, his definition of success was a bit off.
To put it mildly, Ted Bundy was like both Edward Cullen and Count Dracula. On one hand, you had the intelligent, handsome, enigmatic student. On the other, you had the guy who enjoyed watching people suffer. His childhood and teenage years were perfect storms of influences that would eventually lead to the monster we know today.
And let's not forget, it was during this time that Bundy started honing his manipulative skills. He was a master at pretending to be someone he wasn't. This ability to put on a mask and charm his way through life would become one of his most terrifying traits. It's what allowed him to get close to his victims and evade capture for so long.
Absolutely. Ted Bundy's early life set the stage for his later atrocities. It's sinister to think that someone who seemed so normal, so put together, could have such a dark, hidden side. But that's the thing about Bundy. He wasn't just a monster. He was a monster in disguise. And that's what makes his story so fascinating and so terrifying.
As we move forward, we'll dive into how the seemingly normal young man transitioned into one of the most notorious killers in history. We'll explore his methods, the investigation that finally caught him, and the trial that turned him into a media sensation. Stay with us as we unravel the twisted tale of Ted Bundy, one chilling detail at a time.
Next up, we'll delve into Bundy's methods, the tactics he used to lure his victims, and the horrifying acts he committed. Trust us, it's not for the faint of heart. But hey, you didn't tune in to Total Conundrum for a fairy tale, did you? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I tuned in for blood, guts, and giggles. So grab your popcorn and prepare yourself for a deep dive into the mind of one of history's most infamous killers. And remember, if you start feeling uneasy, just remind yourself, it's all in the past. Or is it?
Stay tuned. The nightmare is only just unfolding.
Now that we've given you a peek into the early life of Ted Bundy, it's time to step into the truly nightmarish part of his story, the start of his killing spree. Grab your nightlights, folks, because things are about to get dark. So our story takes a turn in 1974. Bundy, the chameleon of creeps, had moved to Washington State. This is where he officially started his killing career. He began his reign of terror in January of that year, and the bodies soon started piling up like a twisted game of Jenga. His first known victim was Linda Ann Healy, a 21-year-old psychology student at the University of Washington. Little did she know crossing paths with Bundy would lead to a fate worse than failing a midterm.
Oh, Linda? She had her whole life ahead of her, but Bundy had other plans. He broke into her basement room, bludgeoned her unconscious, dressed her in her clothes, and carried her out like a delivery driver carrying pizza boxes. Linda Ann Healy was never seen alive again, and that was just the beginning. Bundy had a method to his madness. He targeted young, attractive women, usually college students. His charm and good looks were his weapons. Picture it, Bundy with his disarming smile, often pretended to be injured. An arm in a cast, crutches, the whole 9 yards. He'd ask for help with his car or get directions, and his unsuspecting victims, being the good Samaritans they were, would walk right into his trap. He was like a sinister Boy Scout with a very different kind of badge collection.
And let's not forget Donna Gale Manson, another unfortunate soul who crossed paths with Bundy. She disappeared on March 12, 1974, while walking to a concert on Evergreen State College campus. Donna was last seen alive that evening, and her disappearance became yet another piece in Bundy's growing puzzle of horror. As the months rolled on, more women vanished. Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Brenda Carol Ball, and Georgianne Hawkins were among many who fell victim to Bundy's lethal charm. Each disappearance followed a similar pattern, and yet he managed to stay one step ahead of the police. It's like he was playing an elaborate game of hide-and-go-seek, only he was hiding bodies instead of himself.
Bundy's confidence was growing, and so was his brazenness. By the time he reached Lake Sammamish State Park on July 14, 1974, he was ready to up the ante. It was a beautiful summer day, perfect for a picnic, a swim, and for Bundy, a double abduction. He approached several women, pretending to be Ted with his arm in a sling, asking for help with his sailboat. 2 women, Janice Ott and Denise Nashland, fell for his ruse. They were never seen again alive. Bundy pulled off the audacious act of abducting 2 women in broad daylight, surrounded by potential witnesses. If it weren't so horrifying, it would almost be impressive.
Almost, but not quite. It's like watching a car crash. You can't look away, but you're horrified the entire time. The physical evidence Bundy left behind began to paint a picture of his true nature. Hair fibers, for instance, were found in his car at the crime scenes. Eyewitnesses started describing a handsome man with a cast or crutches driving a Volkswagen Beetle. The pieces were coming together, but Bundy was still a ghost in the machine. His ability to evade capture was nothing short of infuriating for law enforcement. Despite growing suspicion and increased efforts from the police, Bundy slipped through their fingers time and time again. It was as if he had a sixth sense for when the noose was tightening, always managing to wriggle free just in time.
Indeed, the disappearances of Linda Ann Healy, Donna Gail Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, Georgianne Hawkins, Janice Ott, and Denise Nashland were just the tip of the iceberg. Each case added to the mounting horror, yet Bundy remained an enigma. His daring and confidence escalated with each successful abduction. And let's not forget this little habit of revisiting the crime scenes. Yep, Bundy was just that kind of psychopath. He would return to the sites where he left his victims, sometimes weeks later, to relive and, disturbingly, engage in necrophilia acts. It's like a twisted take on a nostalgia trip, only infinitely more disgusting.
Ugh, talk about a guy who couldn't let go. Despite the gruesome evidence piling up, Bundy's charm continued to shield him. People just couldn't believe that such a seemingly nice, intelligent young man would be capable of such horrors. Even those who began to suspect him found it hard to reconcile the image of Ted Bundy, the charmer, with Ted Bundy, the killer. But the police were getting closer. They were piecing together the puzzle, and Bundy was starting to feel the heat. Reports of his Volkswagen Beetle started to surface more frequently, and sketches from the eyewitnesses were plastered all over the media. The net was tightening, but Bundy, the ever-slippery devil, was not ready to be caught just yet.
Exactly. Despite the growing mountain of evidence, Bundy managed to stay a step ahead. His ability to blend in and his meticulous planning made him a nightmare for law enforcement. He was like a magician, making victims disappear with a smile and a wave. But every magician has a trick that eventually gets discovered, and Bundy's luck was running out.
The thing about Bundy was that he thrived on a challenge. The more daring his acts, the more he seemed to relish the danger. It's as if he believed he was invincible, untouchable. And even for a while, it seemed like he was right. But even the most cunning predators leave traces, and Bundy's growing arrogance would soon become his downfall.
We've already walked you through Ted Bundy's early years and the start of his gruesome killing spree. Now, it's time to dive into the investigation and the capture of our favorite homicidal Houdini. So grab your magnifying glasses and your trench coats, because we're going full detective mode. The police investigations into the disappearances of young women across multiple states were like trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle, except half of the pieces were missing and the other half were smeared in blood. Despite Bundy's best efforts to cover his tracks, the net was slowly closing in. Law enforcement agencies from Washington, Utah, Colorado, and eventually Florida began to see patterns that linked these crimes. They were dealing with a serial killer who was as slippery as he was savage.
Enter Carol Durant, the Wonder Woman who had become Bundy's kryptonite. On November 8, 1974, Carol was at a mall in Murray, Utah, when Bundy approached her, pretending to be a police officer. He claimed that someone had tried to break into a car and convinced her to come with him. Instead of taking her to the station, he drove her to a secluded area and attempted to handcuff her, but Carol, showing more courage than a Marvel hero, fought back. She managed to escape, providing the police with a detailed description and a crucial piece of evidence, one of the handcuffs still dangling from her wrist.
Carol's escape was like the first crack in Bundy's carefully constructed facade. Her testimony and the resulting police sketch were vital. For the first time, law enforcement had a face to put to the horror. And it wasn't just any face. It was a charming, handsome, one that seemed out of place among the monsters of criminal lore. The sketch began circulating, and the walls started closing in on our charming psychopath. In 1975, Bundy's luck took another nosedive when he was arrested in Utah. His crime? Possession of burglary tools, which in Bundy's case included handcuffs, a ski mask, an ice pick, and a crowbar. Talk about a picnic basket for a psycho. The police were beginning to see through his mask of normalcy, and the pieces of the puzzle started to align.
Bundy's arrest in Utah was the beginning of the end for him, but it was by no means a quick resolution. It was like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. The more you tried, the messier it got. During his interrogation, Bundy tried to maintain his cool demeanor, but the evidence was stacking up against him. Forensic evidence, such as hair fibers found in the car that matched those of several victims, was damning. Eyewitness statements corroborated the sightings of Bundy's now infamous Volkswagen Beetle near the crime scenes. The police were connecting the dots, and Bundy was running out of places to hide. His suave persona was crumbling under the weight of mounting evidence. But even then, Bundy wasn't about to go down without a fight, or in his case, a couple of daring escapes.
Ah, yes, Bundy's great escape acts. Houdini would have been proud. In 1977, while awaiting trial in Colorado for the murder of Carolyn Campbell, Bundy decided that staying in custody was cramping his style. During the court hearing, he managed to jump from a second-story courthouse window and evade capture for 6 days. When he was finally apprehended, he looked more like a disheveled hitchhiker than a cunning killer. But Bundy wasn't done yet. In December of that same year, he made his most daring escape from the Garfield County Jail. He crawled through a hole in the ceiling of his cell, made his way into the chief jailer's apartment, changed into civilian clothes, and simply walked out the front door. You'd think he was auditioning for the next season of Prison Break.
Bundy's escape to Florida was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Free and emboldened, he wasted no time in resuming his killing spree. On January 15, 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. What happened next was a nightmare on steroids. Bundy brutally attacked 4 women, killing 2, Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman. He beat them with a club and strangled them, leaving behind a scene that would haunt the university forever.
The Chi Omega attacks are very brutal, even by Bundy's standards. It was as if he was trying to outdo himself in a twisted contest of cruelty. The attacks left physical evidence, bite marks on the bodies of the victims, which would later be crucial in the linking of Bundy to the murders. His violence had reached a crescendo, and his days as a free man were numbered. Bundy didn't just stop there. Just weeks later, he abducted and killed 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, his final known victim. The brutality and senselessness of this murder sent shockwaves through the community and further galvanized law enforcement to capture this madman once and for all.
We've walked you through Ted Bundy's early life, his killing spree, and the frantic investigation to capture him. Now, let's dive into the grand finale, the capture and trial of America's most infamous charmer. It's like the final season of your favorite horror show, only this time, the bad guy doesn't get a sequel.
We're about to put the fun in funeral, folks.
Sounds about right to me. Bundy's final arrest came on February 15, 1978 in Pensacola, Florida. After escaping from jail in Colorado, he decided to take his murderous roadshow to the Sunshine State. But it was a routine traffic stop that finally put an end to his murderous escapades. You see, Bundy was driving a stolen car, a move that was both dumb and arrogant. The arresting officer noticed the stolen plates and decided to check it out. When he ran Bundy's information, the jig was up. Bundy, looking more like a disheveled car thief than a criminal mastermind, was finally in custody for good.
Let's talk about the evidence. Like Shrek and his onions, this case had layers. Police found physical evidence linking Bundy to multiple crime scenes. They had his hair follicles, fingerprints on the handcuffs, and the infamous bite marks on Lisa Letty's body, and of course his Beetle, which had more forensic goodies than a CSI episode. Bundy's arrogance had left a trail that even the worst detective couldn't miss. He had left a breadcrumb trail of destruction, and the police followed it right to his doorstep. But what really toppled all this off was the media frenzy. Bundy's trial was a morbid circus, with Bundy himself as the star clown, and boy, did he love the spotlight. He decided to represent himself in court, because why not add a touch of legal lunacy to his already twisted resume?
Oh, absolutely. Bundy's decision to represent himself was like giving a pyromaniac a box of matches and saying, "Have at it." The courtroom became his stage, and he played his part with gusto. He cross-examined witnesses, including survivors of his attacks, with the confidence of someone who thought he could charm his way out of a death sentence. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. The media lapped it up. This was primetime horror with Bundy in the starring role. His charm and good looks made for great TV, but behind the theatrics, the evidence was piling up. His cross-examinations were chilling. At times, it seemed like he was reliving the crimes through the testimonies. It was like the ultimate power trip for a man who thrived on control.
And let's not forget about the psychological evaluations. Bundy was analyzed by numerous experts, all of whom found him to be a textbook sociopath, narcissist, charming, manipulative, lacking empathy, you name it. Bundy had it. He was a walking, talking murder spree in the making, and the experts saw right through his facade. Then there was the testimonies from surviving victims and witnesses. These brave individuals faced their tormentor in court, reliving their worst nightmares to ensure he never harmed another soul. Their courage in a stark contrast to Bundy's cowardice. One standout moment was when Carol DeRanche took the stand. She recounted her harrowing escape from Bundy's clutches, painting a vivid picture of his predatory nature. Bundy tried to rattle her, but Carol stood firm, a testament to her strength and resilience.
We'll be back after these messages.
This is Tracy.
This is Samantha.
This is The Suspended Sentence.
Grab your latte and join us as we enter Season 2, starting January 1st of 2024.
A year packed full of serial killers that you may or may not have ever heard of.
Thanks for being there.
Stay safe.
And back to the show.
The trial was a roller coaster of emotions, but in the end, justice prevailed. Bundy was convicted and received multiple death sentences. The jury took less than 7 hours to decide his fate, which, in courtroom terms, is practically a New York minute. Bundy's response? He flashed his trademark smile, but you could see the panic behind his eyes. Reality was finally sinking in, and there was no escape this time. He was sentenced to death 3 times over, ensuring there would be no loophole for him to slip through. His arrogance had finally met its match in the cold, hard gavel of justice.
But even with death row looming, Bundy wasn't done talking. In a last-ditch effort to delay his execution, he started confessing to more murders, over 30 in total. Though the actual number is likely much higher, he toyed with investigators, offering just enough details to keep them interested, but never enough to give full closure to the families of his victims. It was his final act of manipulation, holding on to control until the very end. On January 24, 1989, Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. Outside, people cheered, celebrating the end of a monster. It was a fitting dramatic end for someone who had turned murder into a gruesome art form. Bundy's execution closed a dark chapter in American history, but his legacy would linger on, a cautionary tale of how evil can hide behind a charming smile.
We've reached the final chapter of our Ted Bundy saga, The Aftermath. Strap yourselves in for the finale, because the impact of Bundy's crimes rippled through law enforcement, pop culture, and the world at large. First off, let's talk about the impact on law enforcement. Bundy's reign of terror highlighted serious gaps in how police handled serial crimes. Before Bundy, the idea of a charming, educated, handsome serial killer seemed like something out of a horror novel. His ability to blend in and manipulate his surroundings forced law enforcement to rethink their strategies. One major advancement was the development of criminal profiling, which Bundy's case helped pioneer. The FBI's Behavioral Science Unit began to build profiles of serial killers, identifying patterns and behaviors that could predict and prevent future crimes. They finally got a user manual for psychopaths.
Bundy was like the dark muse for forensic science. His case pushed the envelope on forensic techniques, particularly in the areas of trace evidence and bite mark analysis. These tiny little teeth marks were instrumental in securing Bundy's conviction. No tooth fairy visits here. This case was a game changer for forensic odontology, because who knew teeth could be so damning? Bundy inadvertently became the poster child for why meticulous crime scene investigation matters. His downfall wasn't just his ego, but the forensic trail he left behind. But it wasn't just law enforcement that became obsessed with Bundy. Oh no, our culture's fascination with the charismatic killer took on a life of its own. From books to movies to endless documentaries, Ted Bundy became the boogeyman of the late 20th century. The made-for-TV movie The Deliberate Stranger, starring Mark Harmon, and Netflix Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, have kept Bundy in the public eye. Not to mention Zac Efron's recent portrayal of the Ken doll killer. It's like people just can't look away from the train wreck that is Ted Bundy's life.
Bundy's manipulation tactics have become a case study in psychology and criminal justice programs worldwide. His ability to charm and deceive wasn't just creepy, it was clinically fascinating. Experts have dissected his personality to understand how he could blend in so seamlessly, only to reveal his monstrous nature when it suited him. Bundy showed us the importance of understanding the psychology of manipulation, narcissism, and psychopathy. He wrote the book on how to be a sociopath, and the rest of the world took notes.
Absolutely, Tracy. The lessons learned from Bundy's case are vast. It taught law enforcement the importance of interagency cooperation. Bundy crossed state lines with ease, exploiting the lack of communication between different jurisdictions. Today, there's a more unified approach to tracking and apprehending serial offenders, thanks in part to the chaos Bundy created. Moreover, Bundy's case emphasized the importance of paying attention to gut instincts and circumstantial evidence. Many people felt uneasy around him, but his charm often overrode their suspicions. It's a reminder to trust your instincts, even if the guy in question seems like a stand-up citizen or has a stunning head of hair and sparkling blue eyes.
Bundy's influence on modern serial killer investigations is undeniable. His case paved the way for more sophisticated techniques on criminal profiling and forensic science. It also raised awareness about the psychological tactics used by such predators, making us all a little bit more cautious, a little more aware, and that can only be a good thing. And that wraps up our deep dive into the twisted mind of Ted Bundy on this episode of Total Conundrum. We've traced Bundy's horrifying journey from his early life to his final chapter and the lasting impact he had on our justice system. It's been a dark and twisted ride, and we hope you managed to keep your lunch down. We've laughed a bit uncomfortably. We've cringed a lot. But most importantly, we've covered that it's often the most unsuspecting citizens with the darkest secrets. It's easy to get caught up in the gory fascination with Bundy's crimes, but let's not forget the families who were shattered by his actions.
Thank you, dear listeners, for sticking with us through the sickening details and the dark humor. We appreciate every single one of you creepy connoisseurs. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on Apple and Spotify, or wherever you get your fix of true crime and twisted tales. Your support helps keep this morbid train rolling. For more spine-chilling content and updates, check out our website at totalconundrum.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. To stay connected and join our community of horror enthusiasts, trust us, it's like a support group for people who sleep with one eye open.
And guess what? We've got some seriously eerie stuff lined up for our next episode. Got questions, suggestions, or just want to share your own creepy experiences? Send them our way. We love hearing from our listeners, even if it means sleeping with the lights on for a week. So until next time, keep those doors locked, keep your wits sharp, and remember, if a charming stranger with a suspicious smile asks you for help, just say no, or better yet, run the other way.
That's a wrap, folks. Stay safe, stay curious, and as always, thanks for getting, well, way, way more than a tad weird with us today. Bye!
Keep on creeping on. We love you.
Thanks for hanging out with us here at Total Conundrum. Please make sure to check out our website and blog at totalconundrum.com for news, upcoming events, merch, bloopers, and additional hysteria. You never know what will pop up, so be sure to follow along. If you want to show your support for Total Conundrum and gain access to all of our bonus content, please visit our Patreon page. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The links are available in our show notes. If you have any questions, comments, recommendations, or stories to share, please email us at contact@totalconundrum.com. Episodes are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate the love. Keep on creeping on, mother cluckers.